You're listening to the Lost Geographer podcast, and this is episode 27 on Geohacker.
In our modern globalized society, understanding geography and culture is crucial if you want to succeed in life. Unfortunately, many people are still unaware of the world around them, which is fueled by media that are focused only on profits, clicks, and promoting agendas rather than providing accurate information. Here at the Lost Geographer, we aim to promote geographic and cultural literacy through education and travel by bypassing the media. We have guests who talk about their own countries from a native perspective, travellers telling their stories and lessons, and related topics that will aid you on your journey towards geographic and cultural literacy. Get the raw, candid truth about the world we live in and understand your place in it. Because at the end of the day, it's your world. Own it.
Hey everybody, so while this podcast and site do increase your geographic and cultural literacy, the best way to attain literacy is through travel. Now, I understand that many people think traveling is expensive and stressful, and understandably so. However, it doesn't have to be this way. Traveling can be cheap and relatively stress-free if you know the right places to look for flights and already have an understanding of common travel mistakes. If you want to learn how, check out The Ultimate Guide to Smart Budget Traveling. It's a video course that will teach you how to save hundreds on your next vacation and thousands throughout your life by showing you how to make different rewards programs work for you and introduce you to sites that have prices you could have only dreamed of. I will show you how I've done things such as book transatlantic and transcontinental flights in the US for less than $10, and how I don't pay ATM fees anywhere in the world and withdraw money according to the exact exchange rate and not get ripped off. Want to learn more? Check out literacy.thelostgeographer.net for more information. Consider it an investment to learn how to invest in experiences to become geographically and culturally literate. Again, you can find it at literacy.thelostgeographer.net. Hey everybody, welcome to the Lost Geographer podcast, where our goal is to promote geographic and cultural literacy. It's your world, own it. I'm your host, Rohit Amrithar, founder of the Lost Geographer. As always, you can find us at www.thelostgeographer.net. And in this week's episode, I have something different. So I'm here with Michael McCrickard, who is creator of the online game called Geohacker, which I recently found and I have been totally obsessed with because it is so cool. It's something I wish I had when I was 5 years old, quite honestly. But it's a great game. And even as like a 22-year-old, I think it's awesome. So Michael, thanks you so much for being on the show. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, this is great. So, do you want to go ahead and start off like we usually do and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I live right outside of Washington, D.C. I've been here about 23 years now. I'm 55 years old. I am a freelance web developer most of the time, and I give a big shout out to my wife, who has a very lucrative government job, and this allows me to be a stay-at-home dad and do some freelance work and do stuff like Geohacker. So that's been wonderful, and I always have to thank her as often as I can for this opportunity. She's been incredibly supportive.
Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about Geohacker, I guess more specifically about the game itself and what prompted you to create it and what goal you hope to get out of it?
The idea behind Geohacker is that you are an analyst sitting at a terminal and you're intercepting streams of messages from around the world. You lock onto a stream and all the messages in that stream are from one particular country, and each message really is a clue to which country they're coming from. It might be text, a picture, might be a sound file, might be a video, or a web page. And so you have an interactive map that you go to, and the map is what I call a drill down map, where initially you're looking at five continents, and you click on one, zooms into that. It breaks the continent down immediately into its different regions, and then you click on a region, zooms into that, and breaks that region down into its countries, and then you can select a country from there. So we say you're trying to, hack all these different countries, So it's like almost like a trivia game, for people that really like world capitals and flags and world leaders and world culture. And I don't consider any of those things to be trivial, of course, but that's the basic idea. And I've been thinking about, how did I get to this place that this would be the game I created and this would be, something I'd be obsessed with for years. And I think two experiences in my life led to it. When I was in elementary school, we watched a series of educational films about science that were produced by the Bell Telephone Laboratories. And they were directed by Frank Capra, who's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And, you can find these films on YouTube now. It's like Our Friend the Sun and The Strange Case of the Cosmic Rays and Hemo the Magnificent, which is about hemoglobin. And they look kind of corny today, but they just blew my mind when I was in second or third grade whenever we watched these. And to put it in modern terms, I'd say if you could imagine, what if Steven Spielberg were to do a big budget movie to try and explain particle physics or DNA or something like that. That's what it felt like to me. It's like, the world of science sort of opened up for me, and it was so fun. It was like effortless to learn science this way. And then the other experience that was crucial was in the 90s. The first computer game I ever got hooked on was Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? I spent a lot of time playing that. And it was the same kind of thing, really, in that it made learning geography so much fun that it was, it didn't seem like a chore. It seemed like something I wanted to do. Of course, Carmen Sandiego's shtick originally was the World Almanac, and the original version of the game shipped with a World Almanac. And the whole thing was trying to get you to use your World Almanac, read it, and in the game you had to use it to try to solve the mysteries, try to catch the criminals in the game. Geohacker, the shtick is more this interactive map, trying to use it to learn the countries of the world, and along the way absorbing a lot of content about these countries. Some of the content is simple, like the flags and, the maps of the countries and the leaders. But some of it, like the YouTube content, is much more in-depth, obviously.
Yeah, so I can definitely relate to both of those because, when you were talking about how those documentaries made you seem like learning science was fun, that kind of reminded me of, I guess for my generation, we can think of Bill Nye the Science Guy. And we used to watch his shows and think all his stuff was super cool, and how people to this day who are my age still basically worship that guy. He's great. He's incredible. But I can also speak to the second one, Carmen Sandiego, because, again, I remember when I discovered that when I think I was like 9 or 10, and I just remember thinking, like, this was the coolest game ever. And I remember one of my sister's friends, they would go over there quite a bit, and sometimes I'd have to tag along, and I remember they had that game, so while my sister was playing with her friend, I would just sit and play that game, and I wanted to go to their house all the time just because they had this game, and it really helped me learn geography, and I think it's so cool that you modeled this game sort of after that and made it more modern. So, yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure what I was about to say. It sparks a lot of ideas in my brain. Do you remember how blocky it was? Compared to today's games, how rough the graphics were, and the music was these little MIDI files that would go.
Yeah.
But still, because the concept was so great, it reeled a lot of people in. I remember when Paul Barbados was on your show, the Geography Now guy. He was an addict too. It sounded like.
Yep. All three of us. Did you have a goal in mind when you created Geohacker, or did you just create it for fun?
I had always, for a long time, I'd wanted to try to update that game and do something like it. And, part of me, of course, was thinking, how can something like this not make the world a better place? if people start learning more about each other, about each other's civilizations and customs and all that. And I thought it was interesting when Barbie was on your show, he was talking about it, about world geographical knowledge, more like it was, a superpower or something. He was thinking of it in a real proactive way, almost like a weapon that you could use. And that, I found that really interesting. A lot of the YouTube content is so great, and I had no idea, how many people were into geography and how much you could learn in such a short time if you got interested in a particular part of the world or a particular country. So in addition to Geography Now, some of the content in the game I really like is these videos by Seeker Daily, which is part of the Discovery Network. They do, about the same length as Geography Now, about 10-minute videos that will focus on daily life in a particular country. There's a young woman, I think she's from Sweden, Victoria Flamel, I believe is her last name. Her channel is called Victoria Judges, and she doesn't get into the countries that she talks about in the same depth as, say, Paul does, but she does her homework. She's got solid information. She's funny. When you watch one of hers, it's more like you're kind of sitting down with a friend, kind of a casual one-on-one thing. And, it's a friend who knows a lot about Slovenia, say, Croatia. And another YouTuber that some of your listeners may not have encountered that I think they would like is Mark Wiens. Have you heard of him? Wiens.
I have not.
Mark, he travels around mostly in Asia, and his videos are like a street level experience of traveling in these countries. He really gets down into it, goes to the street markets. He's a big foodie. He tries all the food. He tries to learn how to cook the food. He's just fearless. He's wide-eyed and just real enthusiastic about everything. And I love Asian food, so I'm so hungry every time I watch one of his videos. But I've got videos from all these people in the game, and something I added just like a month ago was the ability to just explore the content in the game without having to go through all the hacking, which the hacking part is good for learning as you go and testing your knowledge, testing what you already know. But the explore mode just lets you, focus on a particular part of the world, focus on one country, or just jump at random from one country to another and just, learn about the country primarily through the videos. Cool.
So I agree with what you brought up earlier about how what we call geographic and cultural literacy can definitely help you, in a proactive way, like Barbie said, to be a better citizen of the world and really just help make the world a better place in that way. So I want to hear from your words as well. Why do you believe understanding geography is so important, and why do you feel like it's so de-emphasized in modern culture?
I had been thinking, and I think this is part of the reason, that, of course, we are trying hard in this country to standardize our education, and this has led to a lot of schools and teachers teaching to the test. And so we are focused on the stuff that's going to be on standardized tests. I think that's one reason. I think it was on the show you did with Paul. Y'all were talking about how it really started during the space race, right? Where we realized, we've got to produce more and better engineers than the Soviets, or they're going to, beat us to the moon. They're going to show us up and all this stuff. So I do think both of those play into it. And of course in America, this is such a big, diverse country to begin with. It can be difficult to get people to really open up their minds and their eyes and, start to think about the world as a whole. But obviously the internet has made us so much more connected. It's easier than ever for us to do this. I'm pretty much an armchair traveler. I've been to Europe a couple of times and Mexico 3 times, but I'm hoping one day to really experience as many of these countries as I can. And I understand this podcast called The Lost Geographer offers a lot of good information about traveling and how to do it right, how to do it inexpensively.
Yeah, we have...
or smartly.
Yep. Yeah, we have advice on all this kind of stuff on the podcast. And like I said in one of my episodes, there is no right way to travel except for your way to travel, what you want to do.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah, like my wife's a real cautious person, and I've got a more adventurous streak. We could probably find, common ground in Western Europe, but she's a little skittish. I think I did get her to say she would go to Cuba not long ago. Now that that's possible, I'm hoping we can do that. But beyond just the whole how we can make the world a better place, how we can understand each other better, I do think playing a game like Geohacker, which you can get to at geohackergame.com, I don't think I've mentioned the URL yet, it can not only help us understand other countries, but I think if you keep digging as a result of what you've learned and experienced in this game, you can also understand better how other people perceive us, other countries perceive us in the U.S., or in general, how the East perceives the West. I try to make all the videos I pick for the game be nonpartisan and non-political, and I think about 99% of them are. And some of them, which is probably surprising to a lot of people, come from Russia Today, the state-sponsored news outlet in Russia, and from Al Jazeera English. Both of those are big, 24-hour news outlets that do a lot of just straight reporting on countries that we don't know as much about over here. They cover a lot of countries in Africa and Asia.
And it's funny because a lot of those kinds of news networks are pretty contentious in the United States.
It's like people are afraid to watch them almost. Yeah. And we've got good access to them. Here in D.C., those are broadcast channels, basically, that you can tune in with just any antenna. And, of course, you can find their stuff on the Internet. And the truth is, of course, all news is slanted. All news is biased. We can't escape it, any of us, because bias happens at the unconscious level. And with these two in particular, it's interesting because Russia Today, since it's state-sponsored, is, their bias is more out front. They're more like Fox News in that way. Al Jazeera is more subtle. It's more like CNN. It's definitely got a viewpoint, but it's not as easy to discern. And I just think if people can spend a little more time, on both sides of the world, examining the way news is reported from the other side of the world, we can just get a better idea of how people perceive us. The other night on Russia Today, there was a reporter talking about the invasion of Kirkuk in Syria versus the invasion of Mosul in Iraq. And she pointed out that our leaders and diplomats have voiced a lot of concern about displaced refugees, displaced civilians in Kirkuk, but they hadn't really said anything about displaced civilians in Mosul. So I just thought that was interesting because she's got a good point. I mean, we don't want to come across as two-faced or duplicitous when we're, our leaders are regularly accusing other countries of that.
Yep.
And it's not to reduce those conflicts down to, a simple little anecdote. They're very complicated. But that's the kind of thing that I hope happens after people get exposed to a lot of the content in the game.
Yeah, Michael, I really like the point you brought up about media. And that's something we definitely preach a lot on The Lost Geographer is that, all media will have some kind of bias. It's just inherent in reporting. You report what you think is important, and what you think is important is very subjective. That's what causes media bias. And that's why you need to be very selective with where you get your news from and consider all viewpoints that are on one story, and really also consider the professionality of the news source. Something like Russia Today, even though they are biased, they are professional journalists, versus something like BuzzFeed, where They try to involve themselves in social issues that they know absolutely nothing about while making fun, cutesy quizzes. If you can't tell, I dislike BuzzFeed a lot. Anyway, so I'm really glad you brought up that point. I'm glad you brought up this idea of media literacy, because that's definitely something important. And also, real quick, I know you talked about your URL. I will put that in the show notes of this podcast episode on my site. So if you go to www.thelostgeographer.net/podcast and come down to episode 27, which this will be, if you go to the show notes, I will put a link to Geohacker. It's geohackergame.com, right?
That's it. All one word. Just Geohacker Game.
Awesome. So as we wrap up our podcast, Michael, what are some other cool projects that you have going on?
I wish I could tell you I had some others that were active. I will say I spent years and years trying to create software that would accelerate foreign language learning. And I probably produced 6 or 7 completely different prototypes over a long period of years. And at some point I had to table that dream, but, I've never given up on it. I still think, if I get fluent enough in Spanish, say, I think I'll have a lot better chance at designing it. Which that was the problem. It's hard to design a game that teaches something as fundamental as acquiring a second language, because I didn't want it to be flashcards. I didn't want it as clever as Rosetta Stone and Duolingo are. I had ideas that would take it beyond that to where you could achieve a basic fluency. And if I can get the Geohacker thing to be self-perpetuating, that's what I hope to go back to.
Yeah, learning languages is definitely another awesome skill. I actually wrote a blog post on why learning languages is can really be helpful for you. I'm going to link to that in the show notes as well. But do you have any other travel plans coming up soon? Or I know you said you were thinking about Cuba.
No, I haven't been to Mexico in a long time, and I would love to see Central America and South America. My stepfather was a library science teacher. He grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, but he was so fluent in Spanish that he taught library science all throughout Central America and South America. Every summer he would go somewhere like Colombia or Venezuela. So I got exposed to a lot of that culture, even if I didn't get past Mexico. And I love Asian food, like I was saying. So I'll go anywhere in Asia.
What's your favorite Asian dish?
Right now, we've got a place called Soul Food not far from me. Like SEOUL.
Oh, that's clever. I love it.
And it's the best Korean food I've ever had. So that's my current craze.
That's great. I might have to check that out next time I'm in DC. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it used to be a food truck, and it was so popular that they were able to actually set up a brick and mortar restaurant. That's inside a gas station, but still. Wow. It's great food anyway.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for being on this episode. Your knowledge was very insightful, and this game, like I said, guys, if you haven't checked it out, geohackergame.com, check it out. It's so much fun, and you will learn so much as well.
I'll just say that I am a one-man band with this thing. I've tried to reach out and do forum posts and find collaborators. Nobody's taken me up on it yet, but any aspiring game designers out there, anybody that likes to scour YouTube for good content, or anybody just likes to test games, anything like that, please go to the game, go to the menu. There's menu items for going to the website or contacting me, and get in touch. Let's take this thing over the top.
Second that, please do. This game has a lot of potential and could really, really help bring about a new generation of geographically and culturally literate people. Because, as we all know, the best way to learn is to turn something into a game. So that's all we have for today's episode. As usual, tune in next week for more awesome content. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, it's your world. Own it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Lost Geographer podcast. Remember Remember to tune in next week for another episode to aid you on your journey towards geographic and cultural literacy. In order to help spread the word, please rate, review, subscribe, and share the podcast so that we can help create a new wave of understanding in our world. Remember, it's your world. Own it.